Do you know this guy? If you were active on MySpace back in the day, you might unknowingly even be his friend. This is Samy Kamkar, and in 2005 he unleashed a cross-site scripting worm in MySpace. The so-called Samy worm was a small piece of JavaScript code that would add Samy as a friend and display a message on the victim's profile. The message read,
"But most of all, Samy is my hero."
When a user viewed an infected profile page, the payload would replicate and continue to spread the worm. Fortunately, Samy is one of the good guys, and no severe damage was caused, but this demonstrates just how dangerous XSS can be. So, how did a simple script become the fastest spreading virus of all time? It all boils down to a very common web security threat known as cross-site scripting, or XSS. XSS is a vulnerability class that allows attackers to inject malicious scripts into web pages. This category of vulnerability is one of the OGs of web vulnerabilities and remains one of the most prevalent web application vulnerabilities found in the wild. Let's take a closer look at how XSS works, its different variants, and how we can hunt for this vulnerability. XSS vulnerabilities are generally categorized into three main types, each with its unique way of exploiting web applications. First, there's reflected XSS, where the malicious script is reflected from the current HTTP request. Next, we have stored XSS, which involves a script being permanently stored on target servers. Finally, DOM-based XSS, where the vulnerability exists in the document object model or DOM of the web page, allows scripts to modify the DOM on the fly in the client's browser. Let's dive deeper into how these XSS categories operate. The process of a reflected XSS attack starts with the attacker crafting a tampered URL. This URL is designed to carry the attacker's malicious script. The attacker needs to provide the tempered URL to the victim. This can be through a direct message, embedding it in an email, or by displaying the link on a site the attacker controls. The victim, unaware of the trap, requests this tampered URL, perhaps by clicking on a link. The server then responds with the requested page, which now includes the attacker's JavaScript due to the compromised URL. Once the page is loaded in the victim's browser, the attacker's JavaScript executes, initiating the attack without the victim's knowledge. This executed script can perform various actions. In this example, it sends the victim's session token back to the attacker. With the session token, the attacker can now hijack the victim's session. This can give them unauthorized access to the victim's account, imitating the victim's identity. Compared to reflected XSS, stored XSS is a more stealthy and persistent form of XSS attack. Let's see how it unfolds. It begins with the attacker, who submits a malicious JavaScript through some input vector on a website. This can be a comment box, forum post, or user profile information. This dangerous script is then stored server-side within the website's database until it's retrieved and executed. When an unsuspecting user visits the compromised page, the website includes the stored script as part of the content delivered to the user's browser. As soon as the page loads on the victim's browser, the attacker's script executes the payload. This can lead to devastating consequences, from stealing cookies to hijacking user sessions. Or, as we've seen with Samy's worm, it might even add the attacker as a friend, modify the site's appearance or behavior, and replicate itself to spread further. DOM-based XSS exists solely on the client side. Like reflected XSS, DOM-based XSS doesn't store any data on the server. Before we look at DOM-based XSS, let's clarify what the DOM is. DOM stands for the Document Object Model. Think of it as the backbone of a web page. It's an internal data structure that holds all the objects and properties you interact with on a site. Every element you see on a web page, like text or images, starts as a tag in HTML code. These tags translate into objects within the DOM. Developers use this feature to make web pages dynamic. However, This same capability, if not properly secured, opens the door to DOM-based XSS attacks. So, let's get into it. We have a normal web page, URL, followed by a seemingly innocent query parameter, leading to the dynamic loading of an image. The JavaScript code extracts the foo parameter from the URL using URL search params, and dynamically writes an image tag into the HTML using document.write. Normally, this could be a feature to customize images on a web page. However, if we manipulate the URL such that the foo parameter includes a malicious script, in this case, an on-error event that triggers an alert. Because the script is directly injected into the DOM without proper validation, it executes the moment the image fails to load, popping up an alert box. While this example uses a harmless alert, in a real attack, the consequences can be much more severe. Now that we have the basics covered, let's have a look at two more advanced topics on XSS, Mutated XSS and Blind XSS. Let's start with Mutated XSS. This vulnerability occurs not because of a direct attack on the server, but due to how the browser interprets and changes website code. Here, the browser receives a simple piece of HTML from the server. Notice the div tag and an incomplete script tag with a title attribute. As the browser processes this code, it attempts to fix any irregularities, such as rebalancing unclosed quotation marks. This well-intentioned but flawed behavior can turn benign code into something more dangerous. After the browser's interpretation, what was once harmless code has mutated. Now we have a script tag injected right into the DOM. Mutation XSS is particularly difficult to spot and sanitize by the website's application logic, especially since different browsers will interpret invalid HTML in different ways. Unlike the other XSS attacks we have discussed so far, where the malicious script is immediately apparent, Blind XSS usually hides in the shadows. Blind XSS usually starts with an attacker spraying XSS payloads across various inputs on a website, much like planting seeds that may sprout later. These payloads get saved by the server and sometimes even propagated to other applications. And this is where the blind aspect comes into play. The attacker's script doesn't execute right away. It could be hours, days, or even weeks before the data gets reviewed, like feedback entries or logs, where the payload lies dormant. When the information is finally accessed, the payload is executed. Only then does the attacker's script come to life, often pinging back to the attacker without the admin's knowledge. This delayed execution makes Blind XSS challenging to detect. Two commonly used tools to receive the pingback are XSS Hunter and Burp Suite's Collaborator. Now that we have discussed the different types of XSS, let's discuss some methodology on how to hunt for XSS. The first step is to map the attack surface. Every user input field is an entry point, a potential doorway for an XSS attack. I usually input a simple, harmless string into each entry point. Think of these as test signals to track through the system. A nice trick is to wrap the payload into common HTML tags to check for input sanitization. In the shown example, you should keep an eye out for underlined text. Next, we observe the reflections. Where do these test signals appear in the application's response? Be thorough. In stored XSS, these signals can echo back anywhere in the web application. Now, investigate. Look closely at where and how the test signals appear. Are they in a script, a comment, directly in the body? This tells us the context and guides our next step. Finally, iterate. Tailor your payload to the context you found and try to inject a script. If it's blocked, adapt. In this step, persistence is key, and some tinkering and fuzzing are most often required. That is it for today, and I hope this content helps you to improve your XSS game. Hit that like button to support my content and subscribe with the notification bell so you never miss a video. Your engagement helps me to grow and continue bringing you more content like this. Please share your thoughts, experiences, and feedback in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and remember, stay alert, stay informed, and happy hacking. Until next time.